Rachel stood in the doorway of her own honeymoon suite, still wearing her wedding dress, and watched the two people she trusted most in the world destroy her life in under 4 seconds. She did not scream. She did not cry. She did not say a single word. She simply stood there, watching her new husband and his cousin pull apart from each other in a panic, and something inside her went very quiet. Nobody in that hotel room knew it yet, but that silence was the most dangerous thing in the room. Within 6 months, both men would give anything to hear her scream instead. Because Rachel did not get mad that night. Rachel got patient, and patient women remember everything. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand how a bride ends up standing in her own wedding dress watching her marriage die before it even began, you have to go back to who Rachel was before any of this happened. She was 34 years old, a dental hygienist from a small lake town in Ohio, the kind of woman who kept a color-coded calendar and remembered every birthday in her family without being reminded. She had been engaged once before, years earlier, to a man who cheated on her with someone from his gym, and she had promised herself she would never again ignore the small voice in her chest that tells you something is wrong before your mind is ready to admit it. When she met Brian, that small voice stayed completely silent. For 3 years, it never once made a sound. Brian was easy to love in the way that quiet, steady men often are. He worked in logistics for a shipping company, coached his nephew's little league team on weekends, and remembered that Rachel liked her coffee with cinnamon instead of sugar. Her sister Megan liked him immediately, which mattered more to Rachel than almost anything else, because Megan had never trusted a single boyfriend Rachel brought home before him. Their mother cried actual tears of relief at the engagement dinner. Everyone said the same thing about Brian, over and over, at every family gathering leading up to the wedding. He is one of the good ones. Rachel believed them. She had no reason not to. Then there was Tyler, Brian's cousin, who had been part of Brian's life since childhood and, by extension, part of Rachel's life from the very first date. Tyler was the groomsman who gave the toast that made the whole reception hall laugh and cry at the same time. He was the one who drove 2 hours in a snowstorm to help Brian pick up the wedding rings when Brian's car broke down. He called Rachel his future cousin-in-law, with a warmth that felt like family, long before the wedding made it official. Nobody, not Rachel, not Megan, not a single person in that reception hall, ever looked at Tyler and Brian standing side by side and imagined anything except two cousins who loved each other like brothers. The wedding day itself was, by every account from every guest who was there, close to perfect. The ceremony ran exactly on time. The weather held. Rachel's father did not cry during the walk down the aisle, which everyone had bet money he would. The only strange moment, the only thing that felt slightly off if you looked back on it later with new eyes, happened during the reception, somewhere around 9 in the evening. Brian disappeared for almost 20 minutes and came back with an explanation about parking the getaway car that did not quite match what the valet later remembered. Rachel noticed. She filed it away without a second thought, the way you do on the happiest night of your life, when you have already decided the man in front of you deserves the benefit of every doubt. By the time the reception ended and the last guests were saying their goodbyes, Rachel had noticed 3 small things she could not fully explain. Brian checking his phone twice during their first dance, Tyler leaving the head table earlier than everyone else and returning flushed, claiming he needed air, and a look, just one look, that passed between the two of them near the bar, the kind of look people share when they are both thinking about the same secret. Rachel told herself she was imagining things. Wedding days are exhausting and emotional, and exhausted, emotional people see shadows where there is nothing but tired eyes and too much champagne. She held on to that explanation all the way up the elevator to her suite. She remembers every detail of walking down that hallway in her wedding dress, the sound of her heels on the carpet, the way her hands were shaking slightly as she reached for the key card, not from nerves about her wedding night, but from a feeling she could not name yet. She heard the voices before she even opened the door, low and urgent, the kind of tone people use when they think no one is listening. She told herself it was the television. She told herself it was nothing. She opened the door anyway, because some part of her already knew that nothing does not sound like that. What she found on the other side of that door would end one relationship instantly and quietly begin the destruction of two men who thought their secret would survive her. The room went silent the moment Rachel stepped inside, the kind of silence that is louder than any scream. Brian was standing near the window, his shirt half untucked, his face already rearranging itself into an explanation he had not finished building yet. Tyler was closer to the bed, frozen in the specific stillness of a man who has just realized there is no version of this that ends well. Neither of them said her name right away. They said wait first, both of them, at almost the same time, which told Rachel more than either man realized. Wait is not something you say when nothing is wrong. Wait is what guilty men say when they need a few more seconds to build a lie. Rachel closed the door behind her instead of running from it, and that single choice unsettled both men more than tears ever could have. She asked one question, calmly, the same tone she used when a patient at the dental office asked if a filling was going to hurt. How long? Not what happened, not why, not how could you. Just those two words, because she already understood enough from the way they were standing to know the shape of the answer, even before either man opened his mouth to give it to her. Brian tried talking first, the way men like him always do, stitching together a story about stress and a moment of weakness and nothing meaning anything. Tyler said almost nothing at all, which Rachel would later realize was its own kind of confession, because innocent people defend themselves loudly, and guilty people go quiet, waiting to see how much punishment is actually coming. She let Brian talk for nearly 10 full minutes without interrupting him once, not because she believed a word of it, but because she wanted to know exactly what kind of liar she had just married. By the end of it, she knew everything she needed to know. She did not throw anything. She did not slap either of them, though every person watching this story later would say she had every right to. She picked up her phone, sat down at the small desk by the window still in her wedding dress, and asked Brian one more question in a voice so calm it frightened him more than yelling would have. "Is this the first time?" Brian said, yes immediately, too fast. The kind of fast that comes from rehearsing a lie rather than remembering the truth. Rachel looked at him for a long moment, said nothing, and simply nodded, as if she had just confirmed something she already suspected. Then she stood up, walked past both of them, and locked herself in the bathroom for the rest of the night. Neither man slept. They sat in separate corners of that hotel room, waiting for a door that never opened again until morning, replaying every version of what they would say when it did. What they did not know, what neither of them could have possibly imagined, was that Rachel was not crying behind that door. She was thinking. She had spent 3 years building a life around Brian, trusting him with her family, her future, her name. She was not going to hand him the satisfaction of watching her fall apart. If he wanted quiet, she decided, she would give him the quietest, most patient revenge either of them would ever experience. The next morning, Rachel walked out of that bathroom fully dressed, calm, and unreadable. She told Brian she needed time to think and that she was going home to her sister's place for a few days. She did not mention divorce. She did not mention Tyler. She simply packed her bag, kissed her mother on the phone with a steady voice so no one would suspect anything was wrong, and left. Brian actually believed, for a short and foolish window of time, that this meant the worst was already behind him. He had no idea that Rachel spent the entire 4-hour drive to Megan's house making a mental list of every question she still needed answered. Megan opened her front door, expecting a happy, exhausted newlywed, and instead found her sister standing on the porch with dry eyes and a voice flatter than she had ever heard it. Rachel told her everything in under 5 minutes, without a single tear, which frightened Megan more than sobbing would have. Megan's first instinct was rage, the kind that wanted to drive straight to Brian's apartment and say things that could never be taken back. Rachel stopped her with a single sentence that Megan would repeat for years afterward. Don't give them the reaction they're expecting. Give them the one they never saw coming. Over the next several days, while Brian and Tyler quietly congratulated themselves on surviving the worst of it, Rachel was doing something neither of them thought a heartbroken bride would have the composure to do. She was documenting. She started with the small things, the 20-minute disappearance at the reception, the messages on Brian's phone she had glimpsed but not confronted him about that night, the pattern of late nights Tyler had always explained away as work. With Megan's help, she began quietly reaching out to people who had crossed paths with both men over the past year, Not with accusations, just careful, ordinary-sounding questions that people answered honestly because they had no idea what they were actually confirming. What Rachel uncovered over the following 2 weeks was worse than a single wedding night mistake. Messages between Brian and Tyler went back nearly 8 months, long before the wedding, long before the invitations were even sent. There were hotel receipts from a work trip Brian had claimed was solo. There was a birthday weekend, months earlier, that Tyler had supposedly spent visiting his parents, but had actually spent somewhere else entirely, according to a friend who let it slip, without realizing what she was revealing. Rachel sat with all of it laid out on Megan's kitchen table one night and realized the wedding night was not the beginning of the betrayal. It was simply the night she finally saw it. Rachel made a decision at that kitchen table that would define everything that came next. She was not going to scream this secret from the rooftops the way everyone expected a wronged bride to do. A public meltdown would hand both men exactly what they wanted: sympathy, a chance to control the story, a version of events where Rachel looked hysterical and they looked misunderstood. Instead, she decided to let them believe they had gotten away with it a little longer, while she quietly built something far more precise. She was not interested in revenge that felt good for 5 minutes. She wanted consequences that would follow both men for years. The first move came 3 weeks later, and it looked, on the surface, like nothing at all. Rachel filed for an annulment rather than a divorce, citing fraud, and quietly built a paper trail with dates, messages, and witness statements that made Brian's infidelity a matter of legal record rather than just a private wound. It meant Brian could not simply move on and rewrite the story later as a private matter between husband and wife. It meant every family member, every mutual friend, every person who eventually asked what happened would eventually see, in black and white, exactly how long the lie had lasted. Brian did not see this move coming until the paperwork was already in motion. The second move was aimed at Tyler, and it was even quieter than the first. Tyler worked as a project coordinator at a family-owned company where his uncle, who also happened to be close with Rachel's father, sat on the board. Rachel did not call the uncle in anger. She simply had a calm, factual conversation with her father about what had actually happened on her wedding night, including the timeline she had carefully assembled. She never asked her father to do anything. She did not have to. Within a month, opportunities that had once been quietly promised to Tyler within the family business began drying up, one conversation at a time, without a single raised voice. By the time Brian and Tyler realized how much ground they had actually lost, both men were already standing in the wreckage of decisions made weeks earlier, decisions they hadn't even noticed happening in real time. Brian's closest friends, the same men who had stood beside him at the altar, slowly began pulling away once the annulment filing became impossible to ignore. Tyler found himself quietly excluded from family gatherings that had once been guaranteed, replaced instead with polite excuses and calendars that were suddenly always full. Neither man could point to a single dramatic confrontation and say that is when everything fell apart. It had all happened too quietly for that, which was exactly the point. The final twist came almost 2 months after the wedding night, when Megan discovered something during a conversation with a mutual friend that even Rachel had not expected. Tyler was not simply Brian's willing accomplice in a moment of weakness. According to the friend, Tyler had encouraged the affair from the very beginning, partly out of jealousy over Rachel and Brian's relationship, and partly because Tyler had never actually believed Brian would go through with the wedding at all. It reframed everything. This was not a single bad decision made in a moment of temptation. It was something closer to sabotage, dressed up for months as loyalty and family love. When Rachel learned the full truth, she did not go back and revise her plan out of renewed anger. She simply let the consequences she had already set in motion continue unfolding exactly as they were, because she understood something both men never did. The most effective revenge was never going to be a single explosive moment. It was going to be the slow, permanent unraveling of 2 reputations, built on trust they no longer deserved, carried out by a woman everyone had underestimated the morning after her own wedding. A year later, Brian was living 2 states away, working a job well below what he once had, mostly estranged from the family that had once adored him. Tyler's relationship with his uncle never recovered, and the family business he once assumed would be his future quietly moved on without him. Rachel, meanwhile, rebuilt her life on her own terms, closer to her sister than ever, wiser, guarded, but not bitter. She still says the same thing when people ask her how she got through it. She never once raised her voice. She just made sure that when the truth finally came out, there was nowhere left for either of them to hide from it. So we have to ask you, if you were standing in Rachel's shoes that night, would you have reacted the same way, or would you have done something differently? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos.